Okay, so I'm just going to get straight into this because I genuinely think this topic is one of those things that changes your life when you finally understand it. And I wish someone had just sat me down and talked to me about this like a real person, instead of me finding out at 2 a.m. through a TikTok rabbit hole while my stomach was in knots over a guy who had read my text 4 hours ago and said absolutely nothing back. So let me tell you what was happening with me, because I think you're going to recognize yourself in this, and I really want you to know that what I'm about to describe is something I understand on a deep, embarrassing, been there level. I was dating this guy. Let's call him M. And from the outside, my friends thought we were this really exciting couple. He was charming. He made me feel electric when he was present. And the way he looked at me when things were good made me feel like the most chosen person alive. The problem was the when things were good part, because things were inconsistent in this very specific way that I didn't have language for at the time. Some days he was all in, texting me constantly, making plans, being warm and open and funny. And then some days, sometimes out of nowhere, he would go quiet, like the energy just pulled back. And I would feel it instantly, the way you'd feel a draft come under a door, this immediate internal alarm going off that something was wrong. And here's where I really want you to pay attention, because this is the part nobody talks about. When M went quiet, I didn't just feel a little unsettled, I completely fell apart internally. Like the version of me that existed when he wasn't paying attention to me was a whole different, much worse version of me. I was checking my phone every 10 minutes, refreshing Instagram to see if he was active. Reading our last conversation over and over, looking for the exact moment I said something that put him off. Composing and deleting texts, composing and deleting again. At one point, I sent 3 texts in a row, and the third one was essentially explaining the first 2, which I genuinely cannot believe I did. But here we are, I'm telling you. And the worst part, when he did text back, which he always eventually did, the relief I felt was so massive and so immediate that it temporarily convinced me that everything I had just done was completely rational, that my reaction was proportionate. That, of course, I had spiraled because the situation was that uncertain and stressful, and I'd feel fine for maybe a few hours, maybe a day, and then the cycle would restart. I did this for almost a year. A full year of my mental and emotional energy going almost entirely toward this one person's availability. I stopped really investing in my friendships the way I used to. I stopped caring much about things I genuinely loved before. My mood on any given day was basically just a function of how M was behaving, which means my mood was variable and exhausting and completely outside my own control. And what I called this at the time was love. I thought this intensity was just how deeply I felt things. I thought the anxiety was passion. I thought the obsession was connection. It was anxious attachment, and I had no idea. So here is what anxious attachment actually is, and I want to explain it the way I wish someone had explained it to me, which is without any clinical weirdness and without making you feel like something is broken in you, because that's not the point. And also, it's genuinely inaccurate. When you're a kid, your brain is building what researchers call an internal working model of relationships, basically a set of rules your nervous system follows about what love looks like and what you can expect from people. And if your caregiving when you were small was inconsistent, meaning the warmth was real but it wasn't reliable, sometimes you'd reach for connection and it was there, and sometimes it wasn't. Your brain learned something very specific. It learned that love is available but unpredictable, and the safest strategy is to stay hypervigilant so you don't miss the window when it's available, and to turn up your emotional volume when you feel it slipping, so someone notices and comes back. That is the whole engine of anxious attachment right there. It's a nervous system that learned love is something you have to work to keep, and that relaxing your guard means losing it. I call this the threat loop in my own head now, and it works like this. Something triggers you. A delayed text, a shift in energy, plans that changed, and your brain immediately starts scanning for evidence that confirms the threat it already suspects is happening, and then the spike hits. The full body anxiety, the chest tightness, the racing thoughts, the urge to do something to close the distance. And what you do in that moment, the triple text, the passive-aggressive reply, the cold shoulder, the maybe we should just break up then that you don't actually mean, those are what attachment researchers call protest behaviors, and I want you to hear this because it actually helped me feel a lot of compassion for myself when I learned it. You're doing those behaviors because you never learned how to just ask for what you actually need. Your nervous system learned protest before it learned directness because directness felt too risky. The thing that really clicked for me about all of this was understanding why M felt so addictive, specifically because he was avoidant, which means he had a completely different blueprint. His nervous system learned early on that needing people was risky, so he became self-sufficient, emotionally contained, and he pulled back when closeness increased. And for my anxiously attached nervous system, his hot and cold pattern was the exact same inconsistency that had written my love blueprint in the first place. My brain literally recognized it as familiar. It felt like home, which is a deeply uncomfortable thing to realize because it means you're not choosing intensity because of passion. You're choosing it because your nervous system is pattern matching to something very old. There's actually this concept in psychology where dopamine, the reward chemical in your brain, responds more strongly to unpredictable rewards than consistent ones. It's the same mechanism behind why gambling is addictive. An intermittently available partner is neurochemically more activating than a consistently available one. So when you meet someone secure and reliable, and you feel like something is missing or it feels too easy, that's your anxious attachment system literally mistaking the absence of anxiety for the absence of passion. Okay, so what actually helped me, because understanding all of this is genuinely necessary, but it's also not enough on its own. And I want to be real with you about that because there's a version of this topic on the internet that makes it sound like if you just intellectually understand your attachment style, everything shifts. And that's not really how it works. The blueprint doesn't change when you understand it. It changes when you experience something different repeatedly until the new thing becomes more familiar than the old thing. The first thing that genuinely helped me was what I started calling the body first rule, which basically means before I respond to anything that triggers me, I deal with my body before I deal with my phone. Because when the threat loop spikes, you're in a flooded state physiologically, meaning your cortisol is up, your prefrontal cortex is less online, and the decision-making part of your brain is genuinely compromised. The simplest thing that works is exhaling longer than you inhale. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6 to 8. Do that 8 or 10 times. It takes about 2.5 minutes, and it produces a real measurable shift in your body's activation level. I started doing this every single time I felt the urge to spiral text, and it doesn't stop the anxiety, but it drops it enough that I could actually think. The second thing that helped me was learning the difference between a protest and a need, because under every protest behavior I was doing, there was an actual need that deserved to be said out loud. The triple text was really me wanting to say, when I don't hear from you, I feel anxious and disconnected, and a quick check-in would help me feel settled. The cold shoulder was me wanting to say, I'm feeling hurt and I need you to notice that. But I never said those things directly because direct felt terrifying. What I've started practicing is this structure. Here's what I observed. Here's how I actually feel. Here's specifically what I'd like said once, clearly, and then I stop. Because asking once directly and waiting for a real answer is so different from protesting and getting a reassurance that was given to end the pressure rather than because the person genuinely wanted to give it. The third thing, and this one is less talked about, is coming back to yourself. Because when you're in the anxious attachment pattern for a while, you genuinely lose track of who you are outside the relationship. Your mental real estate goes almost entirely toward the other person. Their mood, their availability, what they meant, whether they're pulling away. And the healing isn't just about regulating your nervous system in relationship moments. It's also about becoming a person with a life and opinions and friendships and interests that exist completely independently, so that a partner's behavior, even someone you love a lot, doesn't have total power over your internal state. Now, the resource that actually put all of this together for me in a way that felt real, not clinical, was this book called I'm Done Begging by Lena Kairi, and the link is in the description if you want to grab it. What I love about it is that it reads the way this video sounds, like a real woman who went through the actual thing talking to you like a friend. It goes deep into the love blueprint concept, the threat loop, protest behaviors, all of it, but it also gives you a 30-day practice, real communication scripts you can literally use. And honestly, the chapter on why you keep choosing the same person even when you know better is something I read 3 times, because it explained things I had never been able to put into words. There's a section on reassurance seeking specifically that I genuinely think should be mandatory reading for any anxiously attached woman because it explains exactly why seeking constant reassurance makes the anxiety worse over time and gives you a different approach. If you take one thing from this video and look into one resource, let it be that book. The last thing I want to say before I wrap up is about what healing actually feels like, because I think people have this image of reaching some finished, anxiety-free state, and that's not what happens. What happens is you start catching the threat loop earlier, you notice the familiar chest tightness, and you name it, and you do something physical before you reach for your phone. You start having direct conversations that used to feel impossible, and you survive the vulnerability of those conversations, and you collect evidence that you can. You start recognizing the difference between a relationship that makes you feel settled over time and one that keeps you perpetually activated, and you start trusting that distinction even when the activated one feels more exciting. The threat loop still fires, the recovery gets faster, your own life gets its real estate back, and that for me has been the actual experience of healing. You are someone who feels deeply, who is wired for connection, who has been running a really exhausting protective program since you were probably very young, and you deserve to understand why and to have actual tools. That's what this is about, not becoming someone who cares less. Becoming someone who can care just as much with a lot less fear underneath it. I hope this helped. The book is linked below if you want to grab it. Please subscribe for more videos. This is my first one, so I'll try to improve. See you guys in the next one.